Alrighty, everyone, welcome to Randy Kramer Part 2. And I actually set up our software to record the two audio tracks, the one from the desktop and the one from the audio, to be separate. So there shouldn't be any ear blasting noise on the other side. But this content's made possible by these people up here in the community and viewers like you. So let's get into this. And you know how we mentioned them? You know, the 1950s movies about the ants? Alrighty, here we go.
Probably stand somewhere between about 7 and 8 feet tall. They're pretty big.
Bipedal?
They walk on four and, use their two upper arms as manipulative digits. So they're pretty big. They're pretty scary. Big mandibles, carnivorous. So they will, bite off a person's head, eat people, tear people apart.
Tear people apart. You know, Starship Troopers from the Arachnids would like chomp people in half with their beaks. See, there's nothing really original to these stories, but we've been saying that since part one.
Use humans or other biological animals as food source or other species as food source. I'd say that they're very similar to driver ants in the sense that they're relentlessly aggressive and hostile and will do their best that they can to consume whatever biological, physiological resources that they need when they come into a system that they've decided to target.
Now, I've heard many stories and interviewed many people about what had happened near Crestone, Colorado, where they sent the Marines in to gas out this group of ant beings.
Right.
And it turned.
And here's an unrelated clip from them.
We then drop cyanide gas into the opening and kill them.
How can you be sure you get all of them?
So yeah, this story you're about to hear is basically them taking the plot from them, because these people are going to assume that no one's seen this old black and white movie from the 1950s, which is a fantastic, awesome movie to watch, by the way. I couldn't suggest it more. It's on Tubi right now if you want a fun old sci-fi movie to watch, but they're counting on no one actually watching these old movies like that, and they just take that plot and sprinkle in their own little variety of fictional spice on it.
Horribly wrong, and the Marines actually tried to put the gas in there and it came back out, and they were all infected, and they had to call
Carbon cut copy of the movie Them.
all civilian helicopters in to rescue these people.
There's even a plot in Them where they have civilian scientists on these little helicopters and they're trying to find the massive giant ant hills. So again, they're just borrowing these stories from pop culture, sci-fi, and even really reaching back and essentially plagiarizing the story from Them.
It was a covert operation to drive them out and kill them in the San de Cristo Mountains, I think it's called.
The Sangre de Cristos.
Sangre de
yes.
Cristos Mountains. Yeah, thank you. What could you tell me about? Is that these beings, or is it a different race here on Earth?
My understanding was that this was a visiting insectoid species. It was not the terrestrial insectoid species, that they were exhibiting unfriendly characteristics that we deemed was necessary to want to evict from this particular territory, as this is also an area in which there are underground military bases functioning. So it was determined that this is an outside insectoid species. They're not cooperating, they're not friendly. They're too close to military installations. Let's see if we can't gas them out and get rid of them. And yes, apparently from what I understand, it did go very badly.
And that Colorado Great Sand Dunes, is that part of, was that formed from anything to do with the insectoids thousands of years ago or millions of years ago?
I think that had something to do with tunneling excavation, which if you've ever seen, ants excavate out a tunnel, they take all these little grains of sand and push them out and make these little mounds on the ground as they excavate. So my understanding is it's likely that was from excavation of tunnels that was just pushed
From like
out
an ancient ant
thousands
civilization.
of years ago.
Right.
There's also in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic on Alderaan, there's a sentient species of aliens that's a threat to Alderaan. And depending if you're on the light side or the Empire side, one side wants to kind of deter them, while the Empire wants to utilize these sentient ants that are native to Alderaan. So again, here we have these guys either intentionally or unintentionally borrowing from the Star Wars universe, mainly Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
Thousands, at
And
least thousands of years ago.
And that's why maybe they returned to Mount Blanca Peak there.
You know, if there's a hive that was emptied out some long time ago, it becomes an attractive space to another insectoid species or another hive settling group to, in the same way.
And this entire time, there's been no viral recordings of giant fucking ants eating people. There's been no mainstream media coverage of these supposed giant ass ants. Come on.
If a hive of ants left and a hive and decided to move somewhere else, and all of a sudden you've got this empty tunnel system, could become attractive to another species of ant nearby and could say, hey, look, we've already got this tunnel system that's already dug in, let's move in. Same thing could happen in this situation where you've got a much larger tunnel system that was built by a previous insectoid species that was then vacated for whatever reason. And then you have another species of insectoid comes along and goes, oh, look, a perfectly good tunneled out system that we can just move into. We don't have to dig. We don't have to excavate.
In addition to them being muscular and strong, do they have psionic, like psionic abilities? Do they have any other special abilities, mind control or anything
They
like
have
that?
some psionic abilities. I wouldn't say that their offensive psionic abilities are strong. So it's not like they have strong telekinesis, strong mind control, strong ability to manipulate matter and energy with their minds, but they do have the ability to communicate, read minds, read people telepathically, read psionically, communicate psionically. So they have a rudimentary psionic ability.
Well, they would need to depend on that, because if they have the same strength as little ants, I can't even imagine what a 6 to however 8 foot tall variant of these would be able to do. They wouldn't need telekinesis, because with their own strength, they'd just be able to tear people apart, tear vehicles apart. But then again, this is all fictional bullshit. So what am I doing trying to rationalize?
Based on their evolutionary need, but for whatever reason, they haven't, what I would say, evolved towards psionic offensive ability, because it's not something that they've moved towards. They still seem to prefer numbers, lots of attacking sort of soldier drones.
What is their,
Like the warrior bugs from Starship Troopers. Large numbers.
main function and concern in the universe? Like what's their purpose? What do they like to mine? Do they like to cultivate? Do they like to inhabit, worlds and take over? Do they have any agenda?
So my understanding is the worlds that they primarily occupy have been drained of mineral resources, water resources. They're fairly consumptive, and they have no problem in making a hive here, making a hive here, making a hive here, and becoming very.
Now, if he says, and they, travel interstellarly on asteroids,
very dense as far as how they occupy certain space. And as they've done that, not unlike the way in which we have done that here on planet Earth, as we have had more and more people occupying more dense space, we consume more. And so they consume more minerals, they consume more water, they consume more food. They are interested in having a complex functional space fleet. That means that they have to have industrial technology. That means they have to convert minerals to materials to vehicles and technology that requires a tremendous amount of resource. So the hive intelligence is willing to sacrifice any part of its lesser self to achieve its goal. So their way of becoming sort of space
So as far as sentient ant people, their science fucking sucks.
ferret attackers follows that model. They are willing to make massive space fleets that they are willing to throw at the wall, and they don't care how many ships they lose. They don't care how many soldiers they lose. That's not the point.
Stargate Atlantis. Let me look this up 1 second. Because there's a species of aliens from Stargate Atlantis that they're vampiric and they have hive fleet ships. The Wraith. They're called the Wraith, and they're actually like a evolutionary species. They evolved from a bug, to where they kind of look like humans, but they're pale, and they take people's life force out. So they're kind of like human vampire leeches, if that makes sense. So that's where they're kind of, again, borrowing from sources of sci-fi like Stargate Atlantis. Again, if that's them being creative and ripping these off, or maybe they don't realize. So, but it's more than likely could be said that the stories and stuff these people come up with are probably more than likely inspired from other places. But that's what, again, as we said in part one, makes people relate to their story, makes it seem more believable, because there's these shreds of subconsciousness from stuff you've seen that makes that connection. Just again, in my theory, again, no psychologist here, but if I was to create a fictional story, the best way is to make those stories relatable is to add in little spices and things that connect and resonate with the reader or the listeners of your story. So that's why I'm thinking most of these, how they do it. And this is how they kind of get gullible people to buy into their stories, because they're drawing from similar things. Just like how Star Wars, George Lucas took the idea of the TIE fighter from the Stuka dive bombers, and there's that connection between the Empire and World War I, World War II Germany, and stormtroopers, Vader being an all black suit. And again, that's also inspired from old black and white samurai movie, The Last Fortress, I think. So again, it's not just these grifting bullshitters coming up with this. It's done in sci-fi fiction with George Lucas and some of the elements of his stuff. And I'm not crapping on George Lucas, just saying the best stories are the ones inspired and draw from other places. And if you're going to come up with some fictional bullshit to grift off of, that'd be the best way to do it.
Point is to have a lot of everything, throw a lot of something at a problem, and overwhelm that system with more ships, more bodies, without any care or consideration how much you lose. And if that's your attitude, then your overall model is going to be one where you're going to need to be.
Or like the Russians in World War II at the Battle of Stalingrad. You just throw so many men and material at your enemy that it quite literally grinds the gears of the enemy's war machine on your own blood and guts. So again, they're drawing from also real circumstance, because I think Joseph Stalin had a order that it was if you retreated or you fell back, you were executed, you were shot for treason. So there's not 1 foot back. So again, these guys are not dummies. Again, to borrow from not only pop culture, science fiction, and even very real history, because then you can make these connections, and it kind of, even though the story has no evidence or proofs, or very any evidence at all, it adds to the legitimacy of the story, because it grounds it with those subconscious or other connections through again, pop culture, science fiction, and real history. That's my theory, anyway.
Producing or taking more minerals, making more materials so that you can replenish the drones and the ships that you're losing. To be honest, they're kind of wasteful. And being as wasteful as they are, they need more resources. So they're mostly looking for planetary systems that have the minerals that they need, food source that they need, water that they need, so that they can continue to feed, water, and provide minerals to the civilized, really populated, densified civilized structures that they have, whose only goal is to make more ships, more soldiers, and acquire more materials.
Have you come across a species that's not carbon-based or bipedal?
Certainly a species that's not carbon-based. I have, and certainly some that are not bipedal, but a lot of the species that we run into for interesting reasons that I think we're still trying to figure out, what some people call the star-shaped model, 2 arms, 2 legs with the head on top, it is very common. It's very common. But we do experience some other species who have more appendages, and again, not just insectoid species, but higher mammalian species that have, more legs or more arms, which can be a little weird and strange, but that happens. And I have seen...
Like from, if you ever read the books or watched the movie about John Carter, a very underrated Disney movie, by the way. Same thing there. And of course, if you've played Mortal Kombat, there's Goro with the 4 arms, Goro and Shiva, if I'm not mistaken. Again,
mineral-based species who are like silicone-based. So they're essentially made of a mineral content, which it also has a water content to it. So think of a crystal that you could hold in your hand that holds a certain amount of moisture in it, so that it's mineral-based, it's a crystalline structure.
and this is also in an episode from Stargate, where one of the characters, they find these beautiful blue crystals in a desert, on a desert planet, and the main character touches one, and he actually gets pulled into a dimension where these sentient crystals talk to him. So again, not sure which ones. Well, these guys were inspired by that episode of Stargate.
But
It's malleable?
squishy.
Yeah.
So like think of a crystal that would be squishy, but still, made of a crystalline structure because it has fluid into it of some kind, some sort of, mineral fluid or hydrostatic content to it.
And these are conscious beings.
Absolutely. The ones that I've encountered, also bipedal, as it turns out. So they got the 2 arms, 2 legs head. But yeah, they're made of complete silicone, crystalline mineral structure.
How large are they?
And do they taste like salt?
The ones that I have seen are what I would say is within human scope. So kind of between the 5 to 6 feet tall-ish. So about the same size as we are in my experience.
Do they have eyes and ears and mouth?
Yeah, they eat food, not the same kind of food we obviously eat. They, eat other mostly mineral content, but again, mineral.
I will say, as far as fictional shit so far, this is probably the more interesting designs that they've came up with.
Content that has a water content of some kind, or oily minerals of some kind that are the stuff that their bodies run off of. They have very different biological structures as far as internal organs and processes.
Yeah, they're fucking aliens that evolved on totally different conditions and worlds according. So what he's saying here is kind of different. Yeah, they're fucking aliens. We get it.
But also similar from what I understand. So they have a biological brain, they have, biological fluid pumping systems, but instead of the cellular structure being based on carbon, they're based on silicone. In a very similar way that biological life that's carbon-based operates, but it's also really unique that it's being evolved out of this silicon-based structure.
Are these bad actors in conflict with humans?
Wherever we run into them, and that they don't feel like they want to play nice and cooperate, oh yeah, I mean we're in conflict with them. Other species are in conflict with them.
And you dealt with this in a combat situation with some of these.
Some of them, yes, absolutely,
right.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And which ones can you divulge? Which species that you were in conflict with?
I've certainly encountered plasmid mercenaries. We've encountered Zeta Reticulans. I've encountered Draconians. We've encountered a few other low-level aggressive species, which aren't a threat to us per se, but that we've had to deal with as aggressors to other friends of ours that we've stepped in to assist with.
Is this happening today, Randy? Is this still going on?
Absolutely. Yeah, right this very minute.
Randy, can you give me an example of this going on today?
Sure. We've been receiving some intelligence that we have become a target of interest for these aggressive insectoids. We think that there is a reasonable chance that we might see them here in our own system sometime soon. This
actually coming to Earth or just making their presence known in our system?
Well, I hope those insectoid sons of bitches are ready because we've got nuclear weapons and hydrogen bombs. So, again, this reminds me not to mention the Stargate Atlantis, but there's an episode where the Wraith show up on Atlantis, and the humans set up a minefield with nukes, and the funny thing about this is Randy Kramer claims to be the Space Marine. And in Stargate Atlantis, there's a company of Marines that are on loan from the United Nations in America to help defend Atlantis. So, and again, Space Marines, you can look at Warhammer 40K, that's been around for a while. Starship Troopers, been around since the 50s and 60s. So, again, their stories are inspired from stuff that's already existed before because they're not creative enough. Because when you need to lie and come up with these bullshit stories, that's the easiest way is to draw from stuff you know.
I believe from the intelligence that we're receiving, we would see them make landfall on planet Earth.
And how does that look for us for the future?
Like an alien invasion.
What's the best way to combat these insectoids?
Probably with some of the technology that we've been using already. So hydraulically operated battle suits, plasma rifles, Gauss rifles. You want something that has, higher penetration power as far as, a projectile, or something that has a higher melting point like a plasma ball. So against, the exoskeletons, which are very resilient, and most lead bullets would just bounce off.
Bullshit. He says most lead bullets. Which lead was a thing back in the 60s, but now these are steel core, copper jacketed rounds. They certainly have more ass to them as compared to when they were using lead bullets. And I can't imagine that these insectoids would have outer exoskeleton armor that would resist Dashka 50 calibers or even 457 or Beowulf 50 caliber or literally any other large caliber weapon. I can't imagine. But then again, we're trying to add a realistic opinion to fanciful fictional bullshit.
I had worked on some of these insectoids before in the projects, and their exoskeletons, some of them were like 3 inches thick and bulletproof for our normal bullets, and they were using special heat rounds. Do you know about this?
Yeah, they're definitely the thick exoskeletons are what we call sort of nigh bulletproof or near bulletproof, which doesn't mean that you can't get a sable round from a 50 caliber rifle through one. You can sometimes, but for most of what we consider our standard projectiles that we fire out of rifles or smaller caliber machine guns, handheld machine guns and rifles, yeah, you're not going to get the penetration that
I bet you could, theoretically. The plus P rounds, 9mm, and 5.56, 7.62 munitions. They do have armored piercing rounds to those. So, Again, why am I arguing this from? This is all bullshit anyway. But let's continue.
you need. So you either need a different alloy or a phosphorus round or a rifle that heats up the round before it goes out, or again, a plasma rifle so that you're getting that thousands of degrees ball of plasma that melts right through.
Is there an agenda that you can share with us? And are they already preparing in space something to maybe block them from entering our atmosphere?
So let me give a little bit of military history 101 here. So anytime you have a level of military technology,
I also want to correlate this with Julian Assange, who created WikiLeaks. So what got him in the trouble was he shared combat footage from an Apache AH-60 Apache helicopter that mistook journalists for militants and killed them. The reason why he got trouble and why there was assassination attempts on him and why the government wanted to throw him in prison was something as little as that. And of course, there's Snowden, who released information that the NSA was spying on Americans. So you can imagine the levels of persecution over such a little thing. Now, if you're already thinking about this, and why you're more than likely correct that this is all bullshit, because can you imagine the level of secrets that this guy's divulging on a public platform on YouTube or whatever show or TV this is? Yeah. He would either be in jail or dead. If there are indeed secrets and technologies and plasma rifles and Gauss cannons, right? So what this guy's doing here is something on scales that are on the 100th, on the nth degree of what Julian Assange and Snowden were doing. So, and this is how, if you're a common person with a little bit of skepticism or like critical thinking, you can say, wow, this is horseshit, because if someone was divulging this information, it'd be treason. It could be even warranted by assassination or imprisonment. You get it, but
you can go all the way back to catapults and crossbows and metal armor, to anything that's way more advanced. Anytime that you have a situation where someone has certain technology, it's good at that time. You do the best that you can with it, but nothing's ever usually perfect, impenetrable, unbeatable. So whatever technology that we have in operation right now, it's good. It's really good. Doesn't mean that it's perfect. Doesn't mean that we can prevent any attack from getting close. Doesn't mean that we can prevent all of them. Doesn't mean that we can prevent every single ship. It's really going to depend on some numbers. How many ships are they going to bring? How many ships do we have? How many ships do we have dedicated to any other necessary projects that we have them dedicated to? Or how many ships do we have dedicated to other military operations that would be...
So this guy's insinuating that the United States or United Nations has space fleets. And again, no one on the ground with a telescope has seen any of this shit flying around. These massive capital ships or these frigates or gunships, these interstellar fleets, not at all. Right.
Problematic to simply pull from. We're going to have to deal with what we've got. And so we're going to use the best of what we have. We're going to use the best tactics that we have. We're going to use everything that we have been learning as a defensive and offensive spacefaring military species now, which we are. But in no way, shape, or form should we expect perfection out of that, especially with a species that has got some experience at being hostile.
Randy, what other intel can you share with us about this insectoid invasion on Earth?
Well, there are certain senior military officials who may not be thrilled about the idea of facing a hostile extraterrestrial force on planet Earth. There are also those who
no shit
understand that if we don't come to a disclosure event, we're going to be in bigger trouble.
There's come on, Randy Kramer, it's all bullshit anyway.
than if we do have a disclosure event. One of the problems we may be having with that is getting people to agree. So if some senior military personnel were to see the potential for an invasion, that might be the very opportunity that they would need to get a forced disclosure event. So not unlike Pearl Harbor, where someone maybe knows that something's coming and they kind of just let it slip through the cracks anyway because they feel like they need to based on a larger military agenda.
This could seriously dissolve the human population quickly.
Or bring us together very
Right.
quickly.
I see that.
Yeah, and if anyone looking around at what's happening in the world,
What's amazing is that these two gentlemen can be such bullshit merchants with all this and like keep a straight face and keep it 100. That's one thing I will say that's impressive about all this is they're hawking this horse shit and they're keeping it real 100%, and that's impressive for some liars and people making shit up.
we're at each other's throats and might just be the perfect time to come together for fighting against a hostile exterior force.
Are you aware of the secret space force heading out and heading them off before they get here?
I would think that there's going to be some of that for sure, but a lot of that, again, is going to depend on numbers. When we actually see an approaching, set of ships coming our way, then we can do some math and decide whether you want to send anything to meet them out, try and soften them up before they get close, or whether you're just going to stand back in the best defense that you have and wait for the first impact and then deal with it.
Do they have fighter ships?
They do, but mostly what they do is landers. So they will have, big ships that have smaller ships, and in those landers we'll have lots of soldier drones, and the landers will drop off, and they're giant bugs. So they like to, do things like giant bugs do, which is get on the ground and overwhelm.
Also sounds like the plot from a video game called Earth Defense Force.
Are there any extraterrestrial allies with the humans that would maybe step it up and help us combat these insectoids?
Absolutely. And again, the minutia of that is debate. So let's just say we have the potential of, I'll simplify the numbers. Let's say we have 10 friends that might be able to help out, might be willing to come to our assistance. Then you have to ask, again, minutia questions like how many soldiers, ships, and personnel can that species lend to us? How much can they afford, to say, based on whatever other interactions that they're having in their own space or in other areas where they're dedicating personnel and military hardware. So how much can they give us? What's it going to cost? Not that it's necessarily got a specific price tag that's like, well, it's going to cost us this much, you have to pay us this much. Right. It may be more like, let's renegotiate this trade contract and then we'll be happy to jump in and throw this many carriers, destroyers, thousands of personnel to assist the process. So there's just some discussion over.
I will say it does make for a fantastic story. What this guy should be doing is he should be copywriting this story into a book or a TV show is what he should be doing instead of wasting it on a grift.
For what's an acceptable agreement to them that we can agree to, that they can be willing to help, which is the same kind of a discussion that someone would have with us if they wanted us to come help them. It's like, well, here's what we can dedicate. If we maybe shift the trade contract, we can do this, dedicate for X amount of, weeks, months, years, this much personnel. So as they say, the devil's in the details. So we have friends, but there's going to be some discussion over who can show up with how much.
What do you think about the extraterrestrial civilizations that I'm aware of and you're aware of that, are living in the oceans and the inner Earth? How are they going to respond to this surface battle? You think the reptilians?
I'm pretty sure the Agarthans are going to come out from the inner Earth and whoop some ass, or the Atlanteans.
Are going to come out and assist? Do you think the Aquifarians are going to come out?
Aquifarians. They actually believe this shit. This is amazing.
And, you know, what's your take on that?
That's going to depend on some different factors. So depending on just how good our negotiations right now are with those other terrestrial species will depend. But we also know that some of their attitude for a long time has been, hey, surface world's your problem. Like if they're attacking, major cities on the surface world, it's not our problem. If they're not coming underground, if they're not coming under the ocean, well, they're not threatening us personally.
So the plot from Aquaman, where one faction of Atlantis causes tsunamis against humans because the humans are dumping garbage in the ocean.
Well, we're not sure whether we want to get involved and, poke that monster in the eye and get them to start attacking us if they're not attacking us. So they will have to ask themselves the question of what it's worth to them or worth the risk to get involved, or whether it's just a viable option to give us some technology, give us some ships, give us some soldiers, give us some tech that we can use. Or whether they would really get involved with their own military apparatus. Those are all interesting questions that I don't think we have the answer to right now, but we're going to find out soon enough.
Now, I was privy to some documentation that did show that there was communication with the inner Earth extraterrestrials and other extraterrestrials on the planet. And because we've been so negligent to the surface of the planet and the oceans, they actually are kind of like, well,
And we just mentioned that from the Aquaman series.
if something were to happen, maybe that'll just help clean up the surface, because these humans are, not respecting Gaia, Mother Earth, and they're poisoning some of their, we're poisoning the land, we're poisoning underneath the land, we're poisoning the water, and they use this stuff for survival down there. So there also might be an agenda where let them just clean it up so we don't have to deal with it, and then we'll take over later.
I would suggest, based on the information that I have also heard, that we have let's just call it a positive, friendly relationship with these folks. But you're correct. They might look at the situation and go, well, I'll tell you what, if you get down to 3 billion people and you still haven't sorted it out, maybe we'll jump in and help you at that point. But you know what? We think you probably got too many people and you're making too much garbage and you're making too much pollution. So, maybe you guys would.
It's interesting how, even with this fictional bullshit, they find a way to intertwine the anti-human population thing along with, Greenpeace horse shit as well. They can mention climate change now too. So this is funny. This is amusing to me because even in this fictional bullshit situation where insectoids invade, right? That there's the Aquifarians and Agarthans that are going to refuse to help us because of Greenpeace echo shit. They so like. It's fascinating, isn't it? How even they're interjecting. Let's be fair here, global homo Marxist bullshit, even with their fictional invasion.
Would be better off without a few people. So maybe we don't need to jump in and help right now because, this could all just.
And if it's true, the Aquifarians kind of sound like pricks. Why would we need their help anyway? We have nuclear weapons. That's another thing he hasn't mentioned. Even in space, a nuclear weapon is not as effective, but it's still going to rattle some shit around. You can bet that. Or what if they use nuclear steam to project tungsten shells or projectiles at 45,000 kilometers a second? Yeah, even if crap has a shield, it's not going to do them any favors. Then again, we're trying to put reasoning into a fictional scenario of insectoid aliens invading.
Work for the benefit and the health and well-being of the planet overall, which some people may think of as a less than compassionate attitude, but it's a big picture attitude.
It's a survival.
If the big picture is survival of the entire planet and not just one group or species, then that's a viable way of looking at it.
Right. As Ronald Reagan said, if we had an alien threat, how all of our differences would just come to an end and work together.
Absolutely. I think that the social psychological assessment of the varying social psychological demographics indicate that that's very likely, that with the presence of a hostile threat from outside, that more than not people will come together and work together for a common goal.
Yeah, the Palestinians and the Jews will all of a sudden get along, right? Well, sing kumbaya. So you slang insect.
Randy, an amazing story. Thanks for being on the show.
You just said amazing story, as in fiction. Why would you say amazing story? I mean, see? We just caught them in the lie. Because then, like, if there was to be an insectoid invasion, they wouldn't attach story. They'd say, "Oh, this is what's going to happen." So that already tells me that the intent here is fiction, amazing story. But then again, for God's sakes, anyone with half a brain and an IQ above room temperature is going to pick up on this grift. That's all bullshit. And that's Randy Kramer on galactic threats and the soon-to-be insectoid invasion. Will the Aquifarians support us? Will the Agarthans finally put aside their racist past and help us dirty surface dwellers? Well, I guess we'll find out. So hopefully if you had it, it's just as fun watching me react to this as I did watching this, then we've accomplished our objective. So thanks for watching. See you next time. And again, I'm actually surprised that people actually buy Captain Randy Kramer's Space Marine bullshit. Anyways, and in closing, don't harass this guy. Look, he's grifting off his own fictional fantastical horseshit. We don't need to send any trouble his way or grief. That's going to find him regardless. And, you know, I'm not going to advocate hate or harassment of this guy. Anyways, see you next time. Hopefully you got a kick out of this these two videos.